Hello and welcome to Dynatrace Workflows in combination with Slack tutorial. My name is Kale Lazic. I'm a technical product specialist, and today we will look into a basic Dynatrace Workflows example. And with this example, we will see how you can fetch data from our Grail data lakehouse, specifically made for observability data. And we will also see in this example how we can fetch external data. So from external APIs, we will see how to combine this data and send this data to our Slack app. So before we get started with the actual hands-on demo, where we will walk you through step by step how to implement it, first of all, I want to make you aware of the documentation. I'm quite confident you already know. So as for any capability within Dynatrace, we have also a specific documentation for workflows. Here you will find all the important information, general information, the components of a workflow. You will find a quick start example that will walk you through step by step how to create a sample workflow. But you can also find descriptions in terms of the permissions you need to assign to your users in order to get started. We have specific documentations for the integration. As said, today we will focus on Slack. I will also show you how to set up the Slack integration. And yeah, that's basically it from the technical perspective about how to configure and create workflows. So this is the documentation that you will work with. Furthermore, I also want to shortly make you aware of the cost aspect of workflows. And for this, we also have the documentation with an example where you can find an example calculation and see what the workflow consumes. So, of course, please be aware of this as well. Yeah, before we get our hands on the basic workflow example, let me also briefly shortly mention the YouTube content from some of my colleagues for the DQL and Notebooks app from my colleague Milos, but also other content that is really good and that also focuses on workflow. As we can see here, right sizing virtual machines, using workflows so to save costs and do this automated. But also other videos such as a really in-depth analysis of, maybe not analysis, but walkthrough of what you can do with Dynatrace workflows with our principal product manager, Christopher, and our DevSecOps activist, Andy Grabner. And also one more YouTube video I want to advertise for is how to use workflows in combination with the ownership feature. Also pretty interesting. So when you have time, please check this out. Good, then let's get started with our basic workflow example. This is our Dynatrace environment for today. And this is the starting page. And in the left corner, you will find the support menu, so to say. And when you expand it, you can jump into the documentation from there, into the community to check if there were some previous questions about maybe some question you have or some issue. And in the community, this is where the Dynatracers from within Dynatrace and within our customer base collaborate and work together, exchange ideas, best practices, and so on. And super important, the live chat. So when you get stuck with Dynatrace and also with workflows, feel free to reach out to us in the live chat, and we're more than happy to help you. Good. So maybe let me make it a bit bigger, the UI. Hopefully this will make it easier for you to follow. We will now jump right into the workflows. So let me just click into the workflows and we can see an overview of our workflows. So there is one dummy workflow that I used for testing. Let us just create a new one. So this is now our blank workflow. I will call it Slack integration demo. Confirm it. That's it. And maybe one thing before we start, please ensure that you have the right authorization settings selected. So the workflow needs basic some basic permissions in order to execute what you configure. This is also described in the documentation. So please ensure that you selected the right permissions so that you can work with workflows. And of course, your user needs also to have the right permissions to utilize the capabilities. And as said, all of this is in the documentation. And if you get stuck, feel free to reach out to us. Good. So yeah, the first step is the trigger. We have here different possibilities. They're also documented, so you can check this out. For our basic example, we will use the on-demand trigger. This is pretty useful as we will just run it on demand, so to say, with a manual trigger. It can also be triggered over an API if you want to embed it in some of your pipelines. And this is then the way how it would work, like with the specific endpoint and the authorization that you would need. So that's pretty straightforward. And as the next step, let us create a DQL query. So I'll just click on the plus, and then we will select execute DQL query. We will not focus on DQL today. As mentioned, my colleague Milos created a few days ago a tutorial on how to use DQL, but there are also many other DQL topics covered on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to check those out. And when you work with workflow, it's really useful to use the Notebooks app as well. So in the Notebooks app, you can test, for example, DQLs that you can then embed in the workflow, or maybe JavaScript functions to fetch data. And for us today, I prepared a specific example. This is a DQL query. It's not overly complicated, but it's also not the simplest. So I still wanted to generate some data that looks a bit interesting, so to say. But just a small or a short explanation. We basically fetch the logs from the last 7 days, and we group those logs by the log level error. So we want to count all the error logs for our process groups. And we also want to have the top 10 process groups with the highest count of errors, okay? And when we run this query, we will see that we have different process groups. We also added the name to the process group with a lookup command. As said, you can check more details about the DQL query in the documentation, or maybe with the YouTube video provided by Milos, where he also explains the lookup command. And basically, this is the result that we have. So the process group with the process group name and the error count. So I'll just copy this DQL that, let's say, we prepared for our workflow. I will take this query and I will paste it into the DQL query section. So let's imagine we have the use case that our manager, she would like to have every 7 days a kind of report on her Slack channel to get the number of let's say the top 10 process groups ordered by log error count. And this is actually what we are now doing as an example to familiarize with workflows. And in this case, we'll just fetch we will run the DQL query and fetch the results as we saw in the Notebooks app. We can also rename this task just to make it more straightforward what we are doing here. We will call it fetch log error count by process group by PG. Let me confirm that, and we can already save it and run it. And that's pretty interesting. When you run it, you can also check what happened there. So when I now run it, I can see the logs there, but I can also see the input, which is the query that we defined, and we can also check the results. And we will focus on the records. So this is really useful. When you open this up, you can simply copy this. And by copying this, you can copy this into your editor so that you have it saved in order to access then the individual keys like name, errors, or entities. Okay, let me close this. And this is kind of the first task in our basic workflow for today. So fetching data using DQL in order to get data from our Grail data lakehouse, specifically for observability use cases at hand so that we can use it. But we also want to use data from an external API, okay? So let me add one more task. I need to edit the workflow again. So every time we save and run, we are not in the edit mode anymore. So let me click again on the plus and let us now run a JavaScript. So with this JavaScript, I will just now copy something I prepared before. So that's a really simple JavaScript that I'm doing there. It's basically using this endpoint within this domain. This is some public random joke API. Let me also show you this in the new tab, how this data looks like. And this randomly gives you out a joke in terms of a setup and a punchline. And we will use just this API as it is public for our example to see how to integrate data from external APIs. One more thing to mention, this is the domain. And whenever you want to integrate with external systems such as Slack or external APIs, please ensure that you whitelist those domains, okay? And how does this work? So let's search for the settings app. Let me open this up and close this view again. And in the settings app, you will find, let me just collapse the left menu to have more space. And this I will also collapse. And when you go down under preferences, it's the fifth from the bottom, you will find this Dynatrace JavaScript runtime configuration limit outbound connections. So let us ensure that we whitelisted those domains. In this case, they are whitelisted, so we don't need to do this anymore. But as said, this is the domain, as you can see here in the tab, and ensure that you don't paste in anything after the .com or before the first term of the domain. So you don't need to specify HTTPS / and so on. Really just use the actual domain. Otherwise, it won't work. So that's fine. We allowed Dynatrace to connect to those domains, so the integrations will work. And then we should be able to save this this workflow and see what results we receive. So let me save this, run this, and then in a few moments we would get the results. So we can see success, that's good. Let me see what we have here. Input, result, that looks good. The same for the DQL query. One more thing to mention, whenever you work with workflows and you want to test and run it multiple times, you can also disable individual tasks, okay? So you can disable, for example, the fetch log error count with the disable task function here, and then it will just trigger the run JavaScript task, okay? Let us also rename this run JavaScript, and let's name it fetch a joke. Okay, let me confirm, save, and that's it. So we almost did kind of the main part of the workflow. That's fetching the data. Now let's put the data together and send the data to our Slack app. For this, let me add a new item or a new task, to be more precise, called send message to a Slack workspace. In case you don't see this Slack task, so to say, you first of all need to install the Slack for Workflows app. As you can see, this is the Hub app. Let me open this in a new tab. And what you can do, so if you need any integration, you can check the Hub and install the integration. So when you're looking for the Slack integration, you would just see the Slack for workflows. In my case, it's installed, but you would just click on it and install it. This is also the place where you can open it or update it, and yeah, have it available for your workflows. For example, we have also other integrations like Jira for workflows. In this case, it's not installed yet. So when you click on this, you would simply need to press the install button, wait for it to be installed, and you can get started. Okay, let me close the hub again, and let's return to our workflows example. Okay, now we have the send message. So let's also rename it, and let's call it inform our ops management. Okay. And this is now where we need to configure it. So at the moment, we have only this one connection to, with the DQL data being forwarded to the Slack task, to the Slack integration. But we also want to include this, this data from the external API. Therefore, let me also add this connection here, like so. And this then connects it to Slack. Okay. Now we need to configure the connection. We don't have any connections at the moment. So let us create a new connection. Again, I will open this in a new tab. It's opening up here. And yeah, this is kind of where we need to configure this Slack connection. But first of all, let's see what the documentation says on integrating the Slack app. So we have a really detailed how-to on integrating the Slack application. And let me shortly show you what the Slack application looks like. Let's just collapse this a bit. So, and open up the Slack app. So this is my dummy Slack app, so to say, that I will use for today's demo. And I will also expand the documentation in order to show you that it's really easy to configure when using the documentation. Okay, so this is Slack for workflows. We need to allow the outbound connections. We did that already, also for the official jokes API, right? So we can skip this. We also have the right permissions granted for workflows as well, so we can skip this also. But as you can see here, it's really well documented, straightforward. If you get stuck, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help in the live chat. And we're now at this point, create Slack app, okay? So this is really a detailed explanation how it works. So first go to Slack API and select create an app. I just copied this API, Slack API link. I will just paste this here. And then it says create an app. So let's do so. So we click create an app. We say from app manifest, as it says in the documentation. We copy this manifest. But before we need to select the workspace, it's the only one that we have in our scenario. And we can already paste the YAML. So first I'll delete it to ensure that I didn't oversee something. And then we can just replace those two values. We will call it demo app. Let me also delete this diamond symbol, and let me also assign a name for the bot. Demo bot. That's good for now. And we can click next a few times and create. And that's basically almost it. So what does it say next? Authorize connection to Slack. Go to Slack API, select your apps. Let's do so. Then select the app that you just created. And then it says go to features, OAuth and permissions. We can find this here on the left side, OAuth and permissions. We will click on this one. And we need also to request to install it. Install to workspace. We will click on allow. And this is already the token that we need. I will copy it. And this token we need in order for the workflow and the Slack to connect. Okay. So it says return to Dynatrace. Okay, then we don't need this anymore. So I'll just collapse it now. At the moment, I will extract the documentation page like so. Make this a bit bigger. I will jump back into the Dynatrace settings view. And what does it say? Settings app. And we already have it open from before. So that's the settings, Dynatrace apps, Slack connection. So let us just see where we have it. Yeah, it's the second from below, the Slack connection, so that you can easily find it. And let's add an item as suggested. Let's call it demo Slack. Okay, I will paste the token that I copied before. We can also check it like so. Looks good. Save it. And we should be good to go, right? Yeah, it says use workflows. So let's say we don't need the documentation anymore. I will just collapse it. Minimize this again a bit to increase the visibility. Like so. Okay. And let's jump back into the workflow. So now let's save this and refresh it and see if we can load the different channels. Let me also briefly mention the different channels that we have. So as you can see, this is our Slack channel that we have today with the workspace Kale test comp. We have 3 channels: general, IT ops management, and random. And this is what we are working with. So now we should see those 3 channels appear in the Slack integration. We can see the connection that we configured, and we can see already the channels. So we will use the IT ops management channel as we want to send this data to our IT ops management, right? And let's see how to configure this, okay? So let me briefly open up the configuration on my left side so that we don't need to do it completely from scratch. I prepared some text that we can use for our manager of operations. So let me just copy this and explain it to you, what we are doing. So in this input section, we have here the message that configures what the message within Slack should look like. You can also see that there's a reference for the Slack Markdown that you can use and the block kit builder. So please familiarize yourself with that when you have time, if you want a specific use case implemented. Today we will use just some basic text, as we can see. We will use the star symbols to make it bold, some text. We have here also a link included to our monitoring observability environment so that the manager can access it quickly. And what we also do is we use the data from the external API, as we can see here, the fetch a joke. And we also use the data from the DQL query with a for loop in order to get the different values into it. This may look a bit complicated the first time, but this is really also well documented. So when you're working with pasting or accessing dynamic values, please use the documentation as well. So let me just bring back the documentation. So this is for the licensing, but what we need is the workflow documentation. You can easily look for it like so. Workflow, introduction to workflows. And this is then where we find the explanation, for example, the for loop that we use for iterating through DQL queries results, for example, or external API call results. And you can find all of the information here, right? You can use also conditional statements like if and many other expressions, as you can see. Okay, good. Then let's jump back into the workflow. This looks fine. We will not configure anything in addition, like attachments or reactions. Also, we don't need any conditions as well. So let's just see if this works. And again, it's a rather simple example. We will use the external data as well as the DQL data. And let's see how this looks like. So let us run this. And then let's see what the workflow says. It says error. We can check. Unexpected end of template. Was looking for, yeah. So probably I copied something and didn't paste it correctly. So let me see what we did wrong. It's, yeah, the for loop is not finished properly. So let us add this finish of the loop. Up. A bit jumping around. Let me see. Like so. We paste it, and now it should be fine. Like so. Ah, okay, it's now double there. Okay, let me just, yeah, let me just repaste this last section completely, because when you copy and paste something and didn't do it properly the first time, you run into issues. So let me just delete this, paste it, save, and run it. Let's see. Let's check. Okay, what does it say now? Yeah, and the tasks are not named properly, so that's again a good error, so to say. We can see here the task names, but what we have here, it's called fetch a joke. That's okay, but we have here get error, log error count. That's not correct. So let us just copy this name like so. Copy, click here, and we really need to use the correct name of the task so that the Slack task knows where to get the data from. And when we save it and run it again, it should be working. Let's see if we have some more issue. Oh, it says success. Let us briefly check this in our Slack app. Like so. It says new message, IT Ops Management, and that's already it. We have a joke to lighten up the mood, the spirit of our IT Ops Manager, Miss Arabella. We have here the overview of the top process groups in terms of log error counts, and that's basically the workflow. As said, it's pretty straightforward. We have a trigger, we do some data fetching and sending data to Slack integration. That's basically it. I hope you liked it. It will help you, and yeah, have fun. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you in chat or in some sessions. Goodbye.